People assume that if you live alone, you must be lonely, that your evenings are quiet in a sad way, that the silence follows you around like something you're trying to escape. But what if the silence isn't empty? What if it's full, just not loud? I didn't always believe that. In fact, when I was younger, the idea of living alone scared me more than failing, more than regret, more than making mistakes. Back then, I thought being alone meant something had gone wrong, like you missed a step everyone else figured out. If you're young and watching this, maybe you've had that thought too, and if you're older, maybe you remember believing it. Welcome back to Young vs. Old. This is where young questions meet old wisdom, where life lessons aren't polished or dramatic, just honest. Today, I want to talk about living alone, but not being lonely, and I want to share my top 5 tips. Lessons shaped by time, by mistakes, and by conversations with people who've lived long enough to stop pretending. I've spoken to widows, to divorced men in their 60s, to women who chose independence instead of staying comfortable. Their stories don't sound heroic. They sound real. And that's why they matter. This isn't advice shouted from a mountaintop. It's advice spoken quietly, across a kitchen table, late at night. Living alone doesn't suddenly make life easy. It makes it honest. When you're alone, there's no audience, no one to perform happiness for, no one to distract you from your own thoughts. And that's where the real work begins. I remember an old man, late 70s, who once told me, "The loneliest I ever felt was in a crowded house where no one really knew me." That stayed with me, because loneliness isn't about numbers. It's about connection. And connection starts with knowing yourself. When you live alone, you notice things. The way mornings feel without rushing, the weight of your own decisions, the consequences of your habits. You also notice the noise you used to hide behind. And at first, that can feel uncomfortable, even painful. But discomfort isn't the same as loneliness. So if you're watching this late at night, or early in the morning, sitting alone, this video is for you. Not to tell you that living alone is better, not to romanticize it, but to show you that it can be meaningful, that it can be full, and that sometimes the life lessons we avoid when we're young are the ones that free us when we're older. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman I met, early 60s, who had spent her entire life surrounded by people. Parents, siblings, kids, co-workers, noise everywhere. Then one day, after her children moved out and her marriage ended quietly, she found herself alone in a small apartment. No one warned her how loud the silence would be. For months, she kept the TV on just to hear voices. Not because she cared about the shows, but because she didn't want to hear herself thinking. That's the part no one talks about. Eventually, she turned the TV off, and that's when things changed. She started journaling. Slowly, badly at first, just thoughts, regrets, mistakes she'd never admitted out loud, advice she wished she'd taken when she was younger. She told me, I realized I wasn't lonely. I was just finally listening. That's when living alone stopped being something that happened to her and became something she chose. This video isn't about pretending loneliness doesn't exist. It does, deeply. But it's also about understanding that solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. And learning that difference is one of the most important life lessons you'll ever learn. So let's talk about how people who've lived long enough figured that out. Not perfectly, not without regret, but honestly. One of the biggest mistakes young people make, one I made too, is thinking that living alone means waiting. Waiting for life to start again. Waiting for the next relationship, the next chapter, the next distraction. Old wisdom says something very different. It says, "This is not a waiting room." An older man once told me, I wasted years treating my own life like it was on pause. He lived alone after a divorce, convinced that everything meaningful was behind him. He ate badly, slept late, avoided mirrors, avoided memories. He thought loneliness was the problem, but it wasn't. The problem was that he stopped participating in his own life. Living alone gives you full responsibility, and that scares people. Because responsibility means you can't blame anyone else for how your days feel. When you wake up alone, you decide whether the day matters. That's heavy, but it's also powerful. One of the first lessons elders share is this: structure saves you. Not rigid schedules, not productivity obsession, but simple rituals. Morning coffee at the same chair, evening walks without headphones, cooking real meals instead of surviving on snacks. These aren't boring habits. They're anchors. When you live alone, days can blur, and blurred days turn into regret fast. That's how years disappear. Young people often ask, how do I stop feeling lonely? Old people answer, build days you don't want to escape from. That's old wisdom, and it's earned. Another lesson that comes up again and again: stop waiting for company to validate your experiences. So many people say, I'll travel when I have someone to go with. I'll eat out when there's someone to join me. I'll celebrate when someone notices. And years pass. An elderly woman once laughed and said, I missed half my life waiting for witnesses. Living alone teaches you that your life still counts, even when no one's watching. Your joy still matters. Your growth still matters. Your mistakes still teach you something. She started going to museums alone, sitting longer at paintings she didn't understand. She traveled alone and talked to strangers she'd never see again. Not because she had to, but because she could. She told me, I stopped needing permission. That's the part young people don't realize yet. Living alone, when done intentionally, removes the need for approval. Of course, there are nights when the quiet feels heavy, when memories creep in, when regret whispers about roads not taken. Old people don't deny that. They just don't run from it anymore. One man told me, loneliness isn't a monster, it's a message asking, are you living honestly? If you're living alone, but constantly numbing yourself with noise, scrolling, alcohol, endless distractions. You're not actually alone. You're hiding, and hiding leads to regret. That's another lesson elders repeat. Face yourself early. The longer you avoid your own thoughts, the louder they get later in life. Living alone forces that confrontation, and while it's uncomfortable, it's also a gift. You begin to hear what you actually want, not what you were told to want, not what looks good from the outside. That clarity is rare and powerful. This is where young questions often come in. Isn't it selfish to focus on yourself? Old wisdom smiles at that. No, they say. It's responsible. Because people who know themselves don't cling to others out of fear. They choose connection instead of begging for it. Living alone teaches you the difference between wanting company and needing it to survive. That difference changes everything. Let's talk about connection, real connection. Because one of the biggest myths is that living alone means being disconnected from the world. Older people know better. They'll tell you that some of the deepest relationships they've ever had came after they learned how to be alone. When you're younger, relationships can feel like oxygen, necessary, urgent. You tolerate things you shouldn't because the alternative, being alone, feels worse. That leads to mistakes, big ones. Elders talk openly about that regret. I stayed too long. I ignored red flags. I confused attention with love. Living alone breaks that pattern. One older woman told me, the moment I stopped being afraid of being alone, I stopped settling. That's not romantic. It's practical. When you're okay alone, you choose relationships from fullness, not fear. Living alone also teaches boundaries. You learn how much social interaction you actually need. You learn when to say no. You learn when silence is healthier than conversation. That's old wisdom young people rarely believe, until burnout proves it. Another thing elders emphasize, community doesn't mean constant closeness. Living alone doesn't mean isolating yourself. It means being intentional. Weekly calls instead of daily obligation. One deep friendship instead of many shallow ones. Helping neighbors without merging lives. One man said, I stopped confusing being needed with being loved. That line hits hard. So many people fill their homes with people to avoid facing emptiness. But emptiness doesn't go away when the room is full. It just gets louder when everyone leaves. Living alone gives you the space to choose meaningful connections instead of chaotic ones. There's also something elders warn about bitterness. When people live alone without purpose, resentment grows. They compare. They keep score. They replay regrets. But those who thrive alone do something different. They give. Not constantly, not self-sacrificially, but intentionally, volunteering, mentoring, listening. One retired teacher told me, I still matter because I still show up. Living alone doesn't mean living small. Old wisdom says your value doesn't expire when your house gets quiet. It deepens. This is where young people often underestimate time. They think they'll Figure it out later. Later comes faster than you think. And regret doesn't come from being alone. It comes from wasting solitude. Living alone teaches patience. With yourself, with others, with life. You stop rushing to fill silence. You stop forcing outcomes. You start trusting that not everything needs immediate resolution. That's not laziness. That's maturity. One man told me, peace isn't exciting, but it's addictive. He wasn't wrong. So what are the real takeaways? The practical advice elders give when asked how to live alone without being lonely. First, be deliberate with your days. Not perfect, not impressive, just deliberate. Wake up with intention. End the day with reflection. Even 5 minutes matters. Old wisdom says unexamined days turn into unexamined lives. Second, treat your home like a reflection of your inner life. Clean it, not for guests, but for yourself. Fill it with things that matter. Remove what reminds you of who you're not anymore. One woman said, I redecorated my life one drawer at a time. That's not shallow. That's healing. Third, stay curious. Curiosity keeps loneliness from turning into stagnation. Read outside your comfort zone. Learn things you'll never monetize. Ask young people questions. Ask old people better ones. Curiosity keeps you connected to the world. Fourth, move your body. Not for appearance, for mental clarity. Every elder who thrives alone mentions this. Walking, stretching, gardening. Movement reminds you that you're still here, still capable. And fifth, and this one matters most, practice self-honesty. Living alone strips away excuses. If you're unhappy, you'll know why. If you're avoiding something, you'll feel it. If you're growing, you'll sense it. That honesty can hurt, but it also prevents regret. Elders say regret isn't about what you didn't achieve. It's about the truths you avoided. Living alone makes avoidance harder, and that's a gift disguised as comfort. These aren't motivational cliches. They're survival strategies refined by time. Living alone doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you're behind. And it definitely doesn't mean you're unlovable. It means you're in a season where your relationship with yourself matters more than anything else. Old wisdom teaches this gently, sometimes painfully, always honestly. If you're young, learn this early. If you're older, remember it's never too late. Loneliness isn't cured by noise. It's cured by meaning. Ask yourself tonight, not with judgment, just curiosity, am I filling my time, or am I living it? If this video resonated with you, take a moment. Reflect. Maybe write something down. Maybe sit with the silence instead of running from it. And if you want more conversations where young questions meet old wisdom, where life lessons are shared without pretending, subscribe to Young Via's Old. We're not here to motivate you. We're here to tell the truth. Thanks for being here.